Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why sometimes you get stuck in a rut of making the same bad choices, even when there are clearly better options out there? Well, this fascinating new study dives deep into something called learning traps and how watching others can either help us escape them or even make them worse. Imagine you are trying out a new investment strategy and your first few attempts lead to losses. You might then avoid that entire sector, even if there are great opportunities you are missing. That is a learning trap, a false belief that stops you from exploring. This paper explores something super interesting: what happens when we watch other people make decisions in these kinds of situations. Can seeing what they do help us break free from our own traps? Or could it just lead us down the wrong path too? They ran 5 studies with over 1,000 people to figure this out. The main idea was to see if watching someone else's choices could help people get out of these learning traps where they stick to bad beliefs, or if it would make the problem even bigger. Think about that investor again. They avoided green energy after an early loss. This kept them safe from more losses, but they might have missed out on huge profits. These traps aren't just about money though. They can affect our decisions in management, how we form opinions, and even lead to negative stereotypes. The researchers explained that these traps happen because we don't explore enough. We learn from our early experiences, and if they're negative, we avoid things even if those things could be really good for us. It is like getting a small sting and then deciding to never go near a flower garden again, missing all the beautiful blooms. So, what did they do in their experiments? They used a task where participants had to decide whether to approach or avoid cartoon bees. Some bees were safe and gave points, others were dangerous and took points away. The tricky part was that the rules for which bees were safe or dangerous depended on combinations of their features, like the number of legs or wing pairs. The optimal strategy involved looking at 2 features, but many people fell into a trap by only looking at one feature. This is where social learning came in. In some experiments, people played the game on their own first, for a while. Then, they got to watch a virtual player make decisions. In other experiments, people watched the virtual player first, and then played the game themselves. The key was that they saw the other player's choices, but not whether those choices led to good or bad outcomes for them. Let's talk about what happened. In the first set of studies where people played the game a bit first and then watched someone else, they found some really interesting things. If people were already stuck in the one-feature trap, watching someone use the optimal 2-feature rule often helped them escape. It was like seeing a new way to play the game. Even more surprisingly, watching someone use a different single feature rule, but one that was different from the participant's own trap, also helped some people break free. It seems like seeing a different approach, even if it wasn't perfect, made them rethink their own strategy. This next experiment was a bit like a do-over, a replication to make sure the first findings were solid. They also added new conditions where the virtual player didn't follow a clear rule, sometimes acting randomly. This was to see if just seeing someone else do something different was enough, or if it really had to be a consistent, understandable strategy. The results showed that random or inconsistent actions from the virtual player didn't help much in escaping the trap. It really seemed to matter if the observed person was using a clear, consistent strategy, even if it was a different one. Looking at the data, they saw that people who already knew the best 2-feature rule weren't really affected by watching someone use a worse rule. They stuck with what worked. But for those stuck in the 1-feature trap, seeing a different rule, especially the good 2-feature rule, really made a difference. It boosted their chances of switching to the better strategy. The numbers showed that when people saw someone using the optimal 2-feature rule, they were many times more likely to adopt that rule themselves, compared to if they just kept playing alone, or watched someone use the same flawed 1-feature rule they were stuck in. Then they switched gears to vertical social learning. This is where you watch someone before you try the task yourself. Imagine learning a new dance by watching a pro first. They found that if the virtual player used the good 2-feature rule, people were much less likely to fall into a trap when they started playing. But if the virtual player used the bad 1-feature rule, people were more likely to get stuck in that trap themselves. It seems like early advice or seeing an example really sets the stage for your own learning. This last experiment was really clever. They changed the rules of the game between watching the virtual player and then playing it yourself. This was to see if people were just copying what they saw, or if they were learning the underlying principle. They found that even when the specific features of the bees changed, if someone watched a 2-feature strategy, they were more likely to adopt a 2-feature strategy in the new game. And if they watched a 1-feature strategy, they were more likely to get stuck in a 1-feature trap in the new game. Even though that strategy was now suboptimal, this suggests a kind of higher order learning trap. where you learn a narrow way of thinking that then affects how you approach new problems. So, what is the big takeaway? Social learning is a double-edged sword when it comes to learning traps. In horizontal learning, where you've already tried the task, watching someone use a good or even a different suboptimal rule can help you escape your trap by encouraging you to explore more. But if you watch someone using the same flawed rule, it can just reinforce your trap. In vertical learning, where you watch before you play, seeing a good strategy can prevent traps, but seeing a bad strategy can actually lead you right into one. The researchers think this happens because we're not just blindly copying, we're trying to understand the strategy behind the other person's choices, a process called emulation. We infer what they might be trying to do, and sometimes we even abstract higher level principles, like it is good to look at 2 dimensions, or it is okay to just focus on one thing. These higher level ideas can then influence how we approach new, even slightly different problems. Ultimately, this research tells us that observing others can be a powerful tool for learning, but we need to be mindful of what we're observing and when. If you are stuck in a bad habit, watching someone use a different, better strategy can be a lifesaver. But be careful when you are just starting out, especially if you don't know if the person you are watching is any good. Following the wrong example can set you up for your own learning trap. This has huge implications for how we teach, how we learn from colleagues, and even how we form opinions in society. It highlights the importance of careful observation and critical thinking in our social learning journeys. And that is the core of this research. It really highlights how our social interactions shape our learning in fundamental ways. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on learning traps. And don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more dives into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.